As a Gentile preacher's kid, I grew up in church before I knew what church was. And in Sunday school and at my mother's knee, I learned the stories of the Old Testament saints. Abraham and Moses, David, Daniel, these are my childhood heroes. And of course, when we got to the New Testament, I understood that Jesus and the disciples were Jewish. In the wider culture, I absorbed some of the negative stereotypes about Jewish people. Didn't really consider the spiritual need of the contemporary Jewish people around me so much. When I graduated from college, I really sensed God's calling upon my life for vocational ministry, but I didn't know what it would be. My dad is a pastor, and his only brother was a pastor, and his only sister married a pastor, and my mom's only sister married a pastor. So the pastorate was kind of the family business, but I didn't feel a calling into being a pastor. And as I was deliberating about what should I do, a friend of mine invited me to come and join American Messianic Fellowship. And I said, but I don't really know anything about Jewish ministry, which was true. In fact, I say the only reason I knew the difference between a Yamaha and a yarmulke was I had a Yamaha. It wasn't quite that bad, but taking Jewish studies at Moody Bible Institute, my brain got filled with all kinds of historical knowledge about Jewish history and Jewish culture. And so I had some intellectual connection to the Jewish people, but it wasn't until our first 4 years of ministry down in Miami. Lori and I were married in May of '76, moved to South Florida in August that year, and had two very different ministries. In Miami, it was college and career, Jewish and Gentile, young people in Bible study. And then in Miami Beach, it was mostly retired, older Jewish people, many of whom were poor and really didn't have strong family connections. So some of my preconceptions or misconceptions about Jewish people were blown away. But the most important thing that happened was a real love for the Jewish people began to develop in my heart. And it was a combination of two things. It was understanding more and more of the Word of God and God's heart for the Jewish people, in combination with the fact that God was knitting our hearts to the Jewish people that we were meeting, believers and non-believers alike. And it really deepened when we moved to Jerusalem and lived there for a couple of years. In addition to being privileged to learn Hebrew and study at the Hebrew University, our neighbors became our closest friends. And we learned not only about their culture and their history, but we learned something of their stories and their hurts, and had opportunity to share the love of Jesus with them. So my question is, if we understand from the scriptures that it's God's heart for the Jewish people, it's very plain. In Deuteronomy 7, God says that it was out of a heart of love and because of his faithfulness to the promises he made to the fathers that he chose Israel to be his unique nation. And in Jeremiah 31, verse 3, God says, I've loved you, speaking to Israel, I've loved you with an everlasting love. Yes, with everlasting kindness, I've drawn you. So understanding God's heart for the Jewish people, as a Gentile believer in the Jewish Messiah, why would I not want to give back to the Jewish people of the two greatest spiritual treasures that I've received? The scriptures themselves, which God gave through the Jewish prophets to the world, and Messiah, whom he wrapped in Jewish flesh and gave to the world. Sharing God's heart for the Jewish people is what I want to do. I hope you do too.